I want to start on Julian Assange, who WikiLeaks had tweeted, I believe, like 3 or 4 days ago, that they had a source essentially saying that the Ecuadorian president and Ecuador was imminently going to evict Julian Assange from the Ecuador embassy in United Kingdom. Obviously, Julian Assange has been there for, I think, since 2012. Basically, it has become more and more and more and more and more and more a clear case of torture, what they're doing to Julian Assange. Torture is not just waterboarding. Torture is not just, the grisly things we've seen at Abu Ghraib, and CIA black sites around the world. There is psychological torture. So they have essentially cut off Julian Assange over the last year from the outside world. They took away his internet. They took away phone privileges. They have basically taken out outside world. He has not left the embassy. He used to be able to go outside on the balcony. He is not able to do that. And there's many reports that his health has deteriorated, his physical health. Obviously, his mental health. Can you imagine being locked up in a small, I think it's like a 1-floor flat in an embassy, 2012? So you're talking, that's 7 years. 7 years. And this is a man who obviously hit one of his biggest sources of mental stimulation, intellectual, presence is the internet. And researching and those kinds of things. Well, he's been cut off from that. So essentially what you have here, and I think people are almost like the discussion on why is Julian Assange even forced to be in this embassy has been lost. Because the mainstream corporate media who used to love Julian Assange, the New York Times was happy to cover and work with WikiLeaks in some cases to release damaging but truthful. WikiLeaks has a 100% accuracy record. Leaks that were very important for the public's right to know. WikiLeaks has released many times, information on war crimes by the United States and other countries, secret military programs by the United States and other countries. Obviously, the Democrats were very fine. They were very happy with leaks many years ago that made the Republicans look bad, and vice versa. But Julian Assange, and I want to remind you of why is he even in this embassy? A lot of you know, but some of you don't. So this is from The Guardian. And again, I'm covering this first because, according to WikiLeaks, they have intel that the Ecuador is trying to evict him, which would lead to him most likely being extradited to the United States, where he would basically get a show trial and be found guilty of probably treason or espionage or whatever they would find him guilty of, and probably get the death penalty, if you ask me. So rumors are rife that Julian Assange will soon be released from the Ecuadorian embassy in London after the organization he founded, WikiLeaks, suggested his exit was imminent. WikiLeaks tweeted that a high-level source within the Ecuadorian state told it Assange would be expelled from the embassy within hours, but a senior Ecuadorian official said no decision has been made to remove him from the building. Why is he there? In August 2010, an arrest warrant was issued for Assange for 2 separate allegations, one of rape and one of molestation, after he visited Sweden from a speaking trip. He was questioned by police in Stockholm and denied the allegations. Assange revealed his fears that if he were extradited to Sweden, he would then be extradited again to the U.S. to face charges over WikiLeaks publications of secret U.S. government files. After an internal arrest warrant was issued by Swedish police through Interpol, Assange presented himself to the Metropolitan Police in December 2010 and appeared at an extradition hearing where he was granted bail. Following a couple years of legal battles, UK courts ruled Assange should be extradited to Sweden, and the WikiLeaks founder entered the Ecuadorian embassy in August 2016 seeking political asylum, which was granted. Swedish prosecutors dropped a preliminary investigation into the allegation of rape in May 2017, stating that at this point, all possibilities to conduct the investigation are exhausted. The separate allegations of sexual assault made by second made by a second Swedish woman were dropped by Swedish authorities in 2015 after the statute of limitations expired. Why doesn't he just leave the embassy? The Met issued a warrant for his arrest after he failed to surrender to the conditional bail set in December 2010. This warrant remains. In January 2018, lawyers for Assange attempted to have the warrant torn up on the grounds that it had lost its purpose and its function. But in February of that year, Westminster Magistrates Court said the UK arrest warrant was still valid. Assange said he continues to fear an arrest on British soil would ultimately lead to an extradition to the US. Does the US still want him? We don't know for sure. But a mistake in a document filed by the U.S. authorities, which emerged in November last year in an unrelated case, hinted criminal charges may have been prepared in secret. The text of the court filing, which relates to a completely separate case, includes 2 mentions of someone called Assange, including a suggestion that the documentation in the case, quote, would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested in connection with the charges. In January, lawyers for Assange said they are taking action aimed at making Donald Trump's administration reveal charges secretly filed against the WikiLeaks founder. So essentially, the origin of him being in that embassy was related to charges in Sweden over assault and molestation that were dropped. He obviously has denied these charges. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the women that came out against him kind of backpedaled a little bit on that. So essentially, Assange has been holed up in an embassy for 6-7 years because there's a warrant out for him not meeting conditional bail? What? This is obviously not the reason he's being holed up. I mean, that's like, there's always like a cover story why somebody is being targeted. And, oh, no, he just, it's the conditional bail. That's why there's a warrant out for him. Sweden dropped the charges that were originally the reason he asked for asylum, because he didn't want to be extradited to Sweden, because he knew if he was extradited to Sweden, he'd be extradited to the U.S. And look at the global geopolitical scene here. The United States is a very, very intimidating imperialist force. So if the United States wants Julian Assange, Sweden, who, like many other countries, wants to be in good stead and be a good boys and girls to the United States, would hand him over. It's probable that the UK would too. And the United States under Barack Obama, who, by the way, Trump is continuing with it, but Barack Obama's administration was the worst, the most unprecedented in American history in terms of going after whistleblowers. The only problem was, eventually, his Department of Justice said, like, the things that you want to do, which included going after Assange and WikiLeaks, like, they won't hold up in a court of law because there are protections for whistleblowers legally as part of freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And, many years ago, these same people, particularly these Hillbots and these Hillary Clinton, neoliberal Democratic Party lifers who now suddenly hate Julian Assange, hate WikiLeaks, think they're enemies of the state, think they're working with Putin. Now, many years ago, they were pro-WikiLeaks. Indeed. And the Secretary of State, by the way, remember Hillary Clinton, she said it was a joke. But she had openly, kind of said, why don't we just take him out? This was her as Secretary of State. And that was leaked. And then she said, oh, I was just joking. So what I think is super, super important here for you to know. Oh, first, let me play the clip from WikiLeaks and Julian Assange attorney. Here is Julian Assange's attorney, Jennifer Robinson.
Well, despite persistent rumours, officials from Ecuador have denied claims Julian Assange is about to be kicked out of their London embassy. Earlier this week, WikiLeaks tweeted that they feared the UK and Ecuador had finalised an agreement for his arrest, which involved his eviction onto the street.
The WikiLeaks founder has been living in the embassy for 7 years now. In recent days, his supporters have been gathering outside, voicing concerns about his deteriorating health. And in a Weekend Sunrise exclusive, we're joined now at Brecky Centre Central by Julian Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson. Morning to you.
Hi,
Thank
Jen.
you so much for
Morning.
coming in. Is there any truth to Julian being evicted by Ecuador, do you think?
Well, this information came from a credible source high up in the Ecuadorian government, and that information was given to WikiLeaks. The accusation was that they're going to expel him and that there's an agreement with the UK that his asylum protection would not be respected and that he could be extradited to the United States with an assurance that he wouldn't be sent to the death penalty. Now, that's not the basis upon which he was granted asylum in the first place. He was, of course, granted asylum because of publishing information about war crimes, human rights abuse, corruption by governments around the world. And that's information that he published and has won awards for, including the Sydney Peace Prize. So it's a very serious situation and one that we are concerned about.
That's a good reset, Jennifer, because it's 7 years ago now. A lot of people have forgotten why he went in there in the first place. But he can't live the rest of his life inside the Ecuadorian embassy. He has to come out at some stage. What is the plan?
The plan is, as it has always been, we've been seeking assurances that he will not be sent to the US to face prosecution for his publishing activities. This is award-winning journalism that they've won awards for, including the Walkley Award for the most outstanding contribution to journalism in Australia. This is a serious situation that an Australian citizen faces prosecution in the United States for that kind of activity. If it were Egypt or Turkey, the Australian government would be criticising it and standing up for its citizen. Why isn't the Australian government doing it in this case? That's our question.
So what are you calling on the Australian government to do? Clearly, they need to do more to move this in some direction.
We have been asking for years that the Australian government ask its ally, the United States, for an assurance that he would not be sent to the US to face prosecution. We want him to be able to come home to Australia. He ended up seeking asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy because the Australian government wasn't doing that. Now, we know that the former Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, raised it at the highest levels with the UK government. We're now asking that the Australian government raise it again with the United Kingdom and with the United States to ensure that he's able to leave the embassy, get the medical treatment that he needs, and be able to come home to Australia.
How is his physical and, I guess, almost as importantly, his mental health? It must be extraordinarily difficult staying in that one place for so long.
I don't think anyone can understand just how difficult it is. He's living inside a ground floor flat. He doesn't have outside access. He can't exercise. He can't go outside for medical treatment. I don't think anyone can understand how difficult that is.
What does he do?
He works, he reads, he continues his work, but it's a very difficult situation. He was cut off from visitors last year, he was cut off from the internet, phone calls. He has very limited access to the outside world, and his health is deteriorating. This is, as the UN is starting to investigate, we consider this is going to have a permanent impact upon his health, and that is torture.
For anyone that says he brought it on himself, he didn't have to publish this information, what do you say to those people?
He has provided a huge public service. As I said, he's won the Sydney Peace Prize, Walkley Awards for having provided this information to the public. He takes that obligation very seriously. It's changed the way we think about the right to know. It's revealed human rights abuse around the world. It's being used in courts around the world. That he's facing prosecution for this and has had to seek asylum for having done so is an outrage and a grave injustice. So to say that he's brought this upon himself for having provided that public service is just wrong. We should be criticising not Julian Assange, but the United States government.
Is he close to breaking?
He's holding up as best as you can imagine in these circumstances, and I can't imagine how I would feel if I was in his position. But
Does he think about walking out, just saying, right, this is too hard, I've got to get out of here?
well, of course he thinks about it, and of course we're concerned that that could happen at some point, but he has been granted asylum, and we are doing everything that we can to make sure that he can benefit from that protection.
And that was Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson. Honestly, yes, I agree with her that Australia should be speaking up. Australia is one of the United States' big allies. But I don't expect corporate media journalists to speak up, because they're not journalists, as I always tell you. They're basically glorified public relations stooges. That goes for New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, the whole nine. But at this point, I think it should be a litmus test for presidential candidates, including Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Elizabeth Warren, anyone claiming to be progressive, and obviously progressive is a loose word in this Democratic field, other than Bernie and Tulsi, in my view. But this is a crime against the First Amendment. This is a crime against journalism. This is a crime against humanity. Yes, he's not been in prison, but they've essentially taken 7 years of this man's life, not just 7 years of his life, But 7 years of his work, yes, he's been able to do work and continue releasing things. I still believe that his release of John Podesta's emails, the DNC stuff, all that, I think was valuable for the public to know. If he would have released and they would have hacked, Kellyanne Conway's emails or Paul Manafort's emails or the Trump's emails, I would have vigorously covered it the same way I did the Podesta leaks. It showed corruption in Clinton's campaign emails. It showed illegal coordination between super PACs and the campaign, which never was covered by the mainstream media, but there are laws barring coordination between super PACs and campaigns, and Hillary Clinton's campaign was breaking them. It showed coordination between Hillary Clinton's campaign and Barack Obama's administration while Bernie Sanders was running. It showed that the DNC was literally crafting strategy memos before Bernie Sanders even announced for Hillary Clinton as the general election candidate and how she would defeat what they thought would probably be Jeb Bush. It showed a lot of other things. So beyond the fact that it's a crime that he's been holed up in this embassy, these people and these candidates attacking Trump, rightly so, for his dangerous talk about fake news and all this. I think that CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post are corporate news. I think that they are propaganda in many, many cases. I'm not going to go as far as fake news because I don't want to mimic what Trump's saying, because what Trump is using it in intellectually dishonest and frankly an authoritarian way to basically shield any coverage critical of him, any reporting critical of him, any reporting that shows illegal or sinister behavior by him as fake news. That's not a valid or even intellectually honest way of using that. So I don't want to say that. But how can these people, both political pundits, journalists, be attacking Trump's attack on the press while in the same breath being completely silent against the Ecuadorian government's attacks on Julian Assange, aided by the United Kingdom and the United States, who is pulling the strings from behind the scenes? And by the way, let's not forget, this was not covered that much after Barr basically said Mueller didn't find collusion. Mueller did not even contact Julian Assange for an interview. He didn't contact Julian Assange or anyone from WikiLeaks for an interview. Julian Assange nor WikiLeaks was charged with anything. So if Mueller didn't even care to talk to the man or WikiLeaks, because the underlying assessment, this is fact, the groupthink is the Russian government or intermediaries to the Russian government were a WikiLeaks source for the Podesta leaks, and that's how WikiLeaks got them. And WikiLeaks was either knowingly or unknowingly passing off stuffs hacked and stolen by the Russian government. Well, if there were evidence of that, you would assume Mueller has that evidence. And if there were evidence of that, why in the world would you not have a conversation with Julian Assange, who, by all accounts, according to Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone's report, was ready and willing to talk to Julian Assange, to talk to Robert Mueller. I don't think he was ready and willing to leave the embassy to do so, but there's things called Skype and things like that. So it's what exactly, to be clear, what exactly, if you did not even think it was important enough or helpful to your case enough to speak with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, how exactly does it stand up that the Russian government was their source and that the Russian government passed off these emails to Julian Assange? You would think that if Julian Assange and WikiLeaks was knowingly taking information from the Russian government, that you would at least demand to speak with him. Mueller tried very hard to speak with President Trump. So no indictment of WikiLeaks or Assange, and they didn't speak with the man. When something doesn't make sense, there's usually a reason it doesn't make sense. You would have to believe that Mueller knew there was no firm evidence and nothing that he could prosecute Julian Assange or WikiLeaks on. But this has never been covered. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.